A while back, I made a video about a game called Miasma Caves, and why I personally didn't think it was ready for early access yet. In the comments for that video, we were actually contacted by another indie developer known as Leyline Studios. They had a game out in early access called Streets Ablaze, a beat 'em up in a classic style similar to Streets of Rage. They asked what I thought of their game, and if I thought that they might have gone to early access too early, like Miasma Caves did. Well, since coming up with video ideas is hard, and I like to give some exposure to smaller developers, I decided to devote today's video to analysis of Streets Ablaze and how ready it is or is not for early access. Also, possibly a few suggestions that I may have for what they could do to improve it going forward. I'm Will with Cliqist. Now let's analyse Streets Ablaze. Streets Ablaze is a side-scrolling beat-em-up with just slightly more than a hint of Streets of Rage inside it. In the game, you control one of three characters, with couch co-op options of course, and have to punch, knee and kick your way through the violence-filled streets. Along the way, you can find health, power-ups and weapons inside smashed up bins in classic beat-em-up style. As you may be able to tell by this footage and my description, Streets Ablaze has a lot in common with retro beat-em-up games of the day. As I said before, its closest comparable game is probably Streets of Rage, but there are elements and hints of a lot of other titles in the genre. There's an SNES in the opening cutscene which makes me think of Ninja Turtles Arcade, and the hyper-colourful style and wacky story reminds me more of games like Double Dragon, which took themselves slightly less seriously. Regardless of the game's retro DNA, the developers clearly had a fondness for the genre, and the games which made it popular. In fact, making a game set in the year 1990X, and populating it with neon and downright ridiculous circumstances, is possibly one of the best homages that anyone could have made to the genre. As of right now, Streets Ablaze is in alpha version 0.11, and is comprised of 3 levels with 2 boss fights spread amongst them. So far, all 3 of the levels currently on offer stick to a very rigid city/industrial design. Fortunately, it is hinted at the final moments that the story is actually way wackier than it might first appear, and things get a little time travel-y, presenting the option for a huge variety to the later levels of the game. So now that we have a decent picture of what Streets Ablaze is all about, we can start to answer the question, did it hit early access too early? Okay, so the most important element when thinking about if a game has gone to early access too early is figuring out the sort of impression it has left. For the most part, the reason that you want to avoid releasing too early is so that you don't soil people's first impressions of your product. When you make the decision to literally sell your game for actual money, you're opening yourself up to some expectations from your customers. If I buy a game for around £7, which is the current price of the game, I'd expect there to be slightly more content. Obviously £7 is a really cheap price for a full game, but we're talking about 3 levels and an end screen which says more coming soon. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone bought the game not knowing how much content there was, then got annoyed about spending their money and refunded it. That person has probably written off Streets Ablaze before it really had a chance to impress them. This would especially be the case if they purchased the game back when it was first released for the full price of £11.39. It's pretty obvious from what I've said so far that I do think the game was released too early. But why exactly do I feel that way? Because I can promise that it's more than just about the lack of levels, although that is part of it. With a beat 'em up, which usually has pretty simple gameplay, the aesthetics and presentation can be pretty important. It's important that your attacks feel weighty, it's important that attacking and moving feel as good as possible. That's because you're constantly repeating the same actions over and over again, so doing the actions needs to feel good. You also need to give us a reason to progress, such as an interesting environment or cool enemies to discover. Obviously things like better animations are going to be worked out later in the development process, but when your gameplay is so bare bones, your lack of refined visual elements is thrown into sharp focus, which may foster bad reactions from your early adopters. Another element besides the animation is that the game just has a few kinks which could have been worked out with some minor beta testing, or I suppose alpha testing. For instance, there are just a few too many times where the game relies on obstructing your view as a way of making it more challenging. This is a blindingly, terrible idea, because it's not a challenge. It's literally like playing blindfolded for a few seconds. Every time it happens I just flail about hopelessly until I can see again. There's no amount of skill which makes playing without sight easier. Honestly, at the point it's at right now, it would make a perfect demo on GameJolt or itch.io. Its style and presentation are actually pretty good, especially the hand-drawn art and the cutscenes. And with the cliffhanger reveal of zany levels at the end, it would probably have actually generated a lot of buzz. As it stands, there are probably people out there who have already written the game off, and that's a massive shame. Before I round out the video, I want to make a few suggestions for the game. This is obviously just feedback from the perspective of a gamer and not a designer, but I like to think that some of my ideas might be useful. Firstly, get rid of the screen coverings. They just don't make the game any more fun, and isn't that kind of the point. Secondly, I might recommend that you implement some sort of system where enemies drop out particles when you hit them. Not only would it add a really pleasing visual element, but you could potentially have the particles drop to the ground to be collected by the player, with a pleasant sound effect and a Hoover style feeling going on. Plus, then maybe you could make the particles heal the character. That way you could make it so that the enemies hit harder and incentivise more aggressive gameplay in a similar way to Bloodborne. Lastly, you guys clearly have some great ideas, so my last suggestion is just don't give up on it. I know it can be downheartening when you start a project, put it out there and it just doesn't seem to get much traction. Just take a look at my YouTube channel. But I really think that you could turn Streets Ablaze into a really fun beat 'em up that fans of the genre will really enjoy. Overall, I think that while Streets Ablaze did hit early access a bit too early, with some attention, solid updates and a decent amount of luck, your game could get pretty popular. I can't wait to see the weird places that the game ends up going, and seriously get more of that hand-on art going. It's got a really interesting style. I hope you enjoyed my video about Streets Ablaze. Good luck to Leyline Studios if they're watching, which I kind of hope they are since I'm probably going to email this to them. And if there are any other indie developers out there that would like me to take a look at some aspect of their game and potentially make a video on it, no promises, but don't hesitate to comment or drop me an email. Thanks for watching guys, share and like the video if you enjoyed it to help our channel grow, and subscribe to see more of our content. You can also check out my channel, where I hope to have a new video about the Retro Stone out in a few weeks. Bye! What? You don't fucking look at me like you're judging me, bitch. She's my fucking wife is judging me and it's not okay.